Welcome back into another episode of the Kings Pulse podcast. My name is Brenden Nunes. I got my co-host Chris Watkins here with me as well. Co-host, friend, co-worker, all of the above. Chris, how you feeling, sir?
Well, I told you I was feeling a lot better about an hour ago because the Niners hadn't won yet, and it was feeling like the Rams were going to win. And now I'm just living in this world where the Niners are 4-1 and playing great, and just doesn't make me happy. So that's that's kind of how I'm feeling.
Bang bang Niner gang, which even as a Niner
Yeah.
fan, I can't lie. The saying a little lame feels weird. Maybe just not my vibe, might really be what's going on here. We got a guest today joining us. I would say also friend, although not coworker, not co-host. Host of his own podcast, though, the Locked On podcast, also works for ABC 10. Matt George joining the Kings
Hey,
Post podcast. What's up, Matt? How you doing?
I'm just glad I get the friend title because according to Deuce Mason, I'm just a colleague. So
Yeah.
Deuce has a
I'll take
And not invited to the funeral. Also.
no, not invited to his funeral, colleague, whatever.
Yeah, a
We'll
lot
get
of
there.
talk. Yeah. Weirdly, a lot of talk about who was going to be invited to Deuce's funeral the other day. I don't know if any of us made the cut.
Well,
I don't think so.
he's always wearing his helmet, so I think he's going to be very safe.
He'll be very
Yeah,
true.
if you want to meet Deuce Mason, he is scootering, biking around somewhere in Sacramento. You can find him. You can also find this podcast on YouTube, any sort of listening platforms as well. If you happen to be watching on YouTube right now, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of the above on listening platforms. And we are in the middle of the Sacramento Kings 2025-26 training camp, the first one run by head coach Doug Christie. We've all been out there these days, and I guess I just kind of want to throw it to you generally, Matt, to start. I have a little bit of direction as we can go, but do you have primary takeaways from now we are 3 days into training camp along with media day?
Well, today was fun. We got to actually see some 5-on-5 basketball action, get a kind of a glimpse of what it looked like. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, I'm a little reeled back in terms of the excitement level. Not that I'm all of a sudden a believer of this team. I still have major questions about how this team is going to ultimately work in a very competitive Western Conference. But the major question I had coming into training camp was what does Doug Christie's team look like? How will Doug Christie implement himself into this team? And it seems like, I don't know about you guys, but what I've seen through the first 3 days of the very limited glimpses on the floor, and then what the players have said, it just seems to echo who we know Doug Christie to be. So, we'll see if that can last longer than 3 days. Hopefully, that can last an entire season, and things don't change when adversity hits, because it will hit. But I've been really excited to see. I mean, this season, apparently, according to Scott Perry, is all about establishing the culture and identity here in Sacramento. And for my money, for 3 days in, they're off to a pretty strong start with that.
Yeah, not much that I think Zach Levine said it at second day of training camp. If somebody asked him how the vibes are at this point, and he's like, well, they certainly couldn't be bad by now. I would hope that they are good. And I would say that the hype and the energy around the team is probably on similar energy there, where everything's feeling good right now. They very much are appreciating the continuity that comes with Doug. I mean, continuity is not the right word, but how much they are pushing in the same direction. Doug Christie and Scott Perry there. They want to be, as you said, Matt, a team that plays like their head coach. They don't really have Doug Christie's on the team, though, which is where I think this gets a little bit weird. But they have been commenting a little bit on the differences between this training camp compared to last, right? And there's obviously a lot of the same faces when it comes to the players on the team, but conditioning being probably the main priority that we've heard so far, partially because they want that Doug Christie style of play. They want to play with pace, comparing Domas to Weber and Vlade and utilizing him in that way, and getting a little bit creative with how they may do that this season. And they want to be picking up 94th beat. And apparently Dennis Schroder is the kingpin to all of this on both sides. Chris, what have you thought so far of everything they've been preaching, specifically given, the roster limitations?
Yeah, it's interesting because as you kind of mentioned, them leaning into defense without really having a defensive personnel. I think you can kind of maybe say the same about them running as well. I know Dennis Schroder obviously is known for his speed in general, Zach LaVine too, but you still have Domantas Sabonis, who I guess you could say does like to run, but I don't know if that's what I expected out of this team, is just to necessarily say that they're going to blow teams away. I think Malik today said that the thing that's really going to stick out in their first game is going to be just the pace at which they play at. That just wasn't really how I expected this team to play. I thought it was going to be more of a half court centric team, just because of how DeMar DeRozan plays. Domantas Sabonis, obviously, we know in the past has played dribble handoff. That's obviously more of a half court offense. To hear them prioritize pace and defense just isn't what I would have expected to come out of this. But I guess we'll see how it plays, because I am starting to get convinced, as Brenden, you kind of mentioned in the last episode we had, like it is kind of the season for falling for all these narratives and starting to believe in things because it's all fresh and new. But I can see the vision of what they're trying to do, and again, like that's kind of Scott Perry's whole purpose of this season, is to form an identity, and I can at least see the buy-in and starting to understand that these guys at least see it as well.
Last season, for what it's worth, 19th in pace and 22nd in defense. And again, big change would be, obviously there was change midseason last year that messes with those overall numbers a little bit, but big change is really going from Doug Christie to Mike Brown, and Dennis Schroder from the starting point of, if you're going back to the beginning of last season, De'Aaron Fox. And funnily enough, both of those guys, I would say Mike Brown and De'Aaron Fox, kind of play into this like defensive orientation, right? If that's what Scott Perry's preaching. And then the pace specifically, it's like that is kind of exactly De'Aaron Fox's strength. And for what it's worth, De'Aaron Fox not starting the beginning of this season in San Antonio, which I think is fairly notable after signing that max contract with them. But being the best conditioned team in the NBA is what Doug has said. And on Tuesday, quote from him, it's tough. Conditioning is not for everybody. And then being in the condition to be the best conditioned team in this league definitely ain't for everybody, but it's what the Sacramento Kings is about. Does that come off as like, hey, I'm trying to optimize? I mean, of course he is trying to optimize his roster. I'm not trying to say that he's not, but does it feel like almost Doug is saying, I would play this way I prefer to play this style of basketball pretty much no matter who we have on this roster?
Yeah, to me, I think it comes off as that's a non-negotiable in Doug Christie's system, and by extension, Scott Perry. What I've noticed is when these players talk about Doug, they also talk about Scott and vice versa. It seems like there's a pretty unified front with the two of them and how their vision for how this team is going to play going forward. What's interesting, though, is I thought one of the major differences between Doug Christie when he took over and Mike Brown when he was here is I thought Doug did a better job of utilizing the roster to their strengths, not what Mike Brown wanted the roster to be. Because if you think about it, like you kind of laid out there, Brenden, like the messaging between Doug and Mike isn't that different. Like pace and defense. These are two things that Mike was all about for the 3 seasons that he was here. Now, what could be different and hopefully will be different is the delivery of that message. And maybe it's easier for players to hear it from a former player in Doug Christie. Maybe Doug, I mean, we know how great of a people person Doug is and how he can illustrate his point and connect with people. So that'll hopefully work. But what I'm very curious to see, not that I'm wanting them to face adversity right away, but when that adversity does hit, does that message get old? Do those non-negotiables suddenly become a little more negotiable? Because Mike Brown's message clearly got old. Where he tried to be a stickler on or tried to be very firm on did not sit well with a lot of players, and how he tried to deliver it, clearly rubbed some players the wrong way. There's a disconnect in that sense. And while I love the 94 feet, I love it. The Kings should just put it on a shirt at this point because everybody's talking about it. Like, I can envision Keon Ellis guarding 94 feet. I can envision Devin Carter guarding 94 feet. I need to see what DeMar DeRozan looks like guarding 94 feet. I need to see what Zach LaVine looks like guarding 94 feet. we just haven't seen it, and it's kind of hard to fathom. Now, if he can get those two to buy into it and do it, that's even more of a credit into Doug Christie and the relationship that he has with those players. But if Zach LaVine doesn't, if DeMar doesn't, is Doug going to come down hard on that and take one of them out of the game to put Keon Ellis in? Like, those are the crossroads that Doug hasn't faced yet as a coach that he'll get to. And I'm very curious to see how he handles them, because he might be able to handle them a lot better than Mike was able to last year.
You mentioned shirts, and I'm going to respond to what you say in a sec, but it made me think of, have you guys seen the Clippers shirts that they've been wearing?
Yes, I have.
Matt, if you haven't seen this, I'm going to have to send it to you. I can't pull it up on the screen right now, but it says and then it's an acronym essentially, and it says fuck down the shirt, back, get the fuck back, right? F stands for floor balance, right? And it says all of this on the shirt, by the way. U stands for urgency. C stands for consistent communication and concentration. And K stands for no, we lost to Denver because of transition.
There you go.
It says all of this on the shirt. It is absolutely ridiculous.
Is there a tree anywhere on this shirt?
Is there a way if I take this off? There you go. Anybody on the YouTube side can see a little bit here. Okay, well, this is a different edit of the shirt that Chris managed to find.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. He may have taken a shot at Russell Westbrook. Yeah, hilarious looking shirts. So at very least, Doug is not, they're not wearing these walking about.
Well, do you remember Mike Brown's shirt from last year too? He had like the Embrace the Climb shirt from last year, because he brought like a climber in to speak to the team.
Oh, that's right.
You remember that?
There was a shirt that had the name of a mountain on the back of it, and I don't remember the mountain name.
Because that was the mountain that the climber climbed, and he spoke to the team in practice. And I don't know if that message stuck with Mike. That and his contracts that he made everybody sign. Those didn't work out so well.
Yeah, I wonder what happened to those. Those would be amazing collector items. They are probably nowhere to be found. Maybe they're in a vault somewhere. Who knows at this point? But to what you were saying, exactly, with Royale, they should bring Royale back when De'Aaron comes into town, by the way.
They never paid that off, by the way. They teased that return and then never did it. And I'm still mad at the Kings for doing that.
I feel like he became so much of like a villain over time that it eventually became a good thing. I'm like, they really should lean into this.
Well, the way the second half of last season went, Royale would have been the perfect mascot for it.
This is true. But like you were talking about, and I managed to get distracted by you just saying the word t-shirt, other guys picking up 94 feet, right? Like the idea of DeMar doing that, of Zach doing that. Is that even going to happen? Because I kind of feel like the point guard is the one that's probably picking up here, right? But if you're on the other side, it's like, okay, who is DeMar guarding? You're bringing the ball up. And maybe the Kings obviously alter their matchups a little bit there, but I almost wonder, like, does picking up 94 feet really mean that, like, not everybody is pressed up, obviously. And that's where you have your Dennis Schroder, who they obviously think play into that. Keon Ellis. Maybe we're going to see Malik Monk doing that a little bit. That's the one where I'm like, it kind of falls into the DeMar and Zach thing a little bit there. Devin plays into that well. But yeah, I mean, do you think the 94 feet thing can play out smoothly, Chris?
I mean, I mostly agree with what you said there. Even with the Malik thing, I would say that probably if we want to go into the conspiracies of, who's wearing what jerseys at training camp, like, you could say Keon Ellis is going to be on the floor for a majority of the time that Malik Monk is out there, and so it's really not something you have to worry about. Matt mentioned Devin Carter being one of those guys as well. Funny enough, I think in terms of their defensive plan, if it is to guard 94 feet, it actually kind of, in a weird way, seems like the most practical thing that they could do, because that's actually what they have the personnel for in Dennis Schroder, in Keon Ellis. Devin Carter, I can absolutely see making his mark doing that. Those are really the strong point of their defense. So in a weird way, maybe it is Doug Christie leaning into what could be their best asset as a defensive team, because as we've discussed, it's definitely not the wings. It's not going to be the guys on the perimeter necessarily stopping penetration or anything like that. And then, as again, we know there's nobody at the rim defending the paint. And so, again, in a weird way, it is kind of their defensive strength and I guess the point in which they could create the most chaos, because the other thing that Doug has really been preaching more than anything, besides conditioning 100%, is physicality. And that's also something Doug's been incredibly consistent with since he was on the radio. Like, he always used to say, make them feel you. And that's really, I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to be on a shirt at some point in the Doug Christie era. Because that's really his mantra as a like just a philosophy. Really, that is his ethos as a basketball player, is make sure as a defender at all points the guy with the ball knows that you are defending them. And so I kind of feel like that is, in a weird way, Doug Christie implementing his identity. And the other thing I'll mention too, the team that really highlights all of this, or the player, I guess, is TJ McConnell. And I feel like I've heard the Pacers mentioned so many times from this team. And, I feel like that's going to be pretty much every team that's in this middle spot where, their season can go one of two ways. They're going to convince themselves that it's going to be the positive side of it. But I think I heard Zach Lowe say that Rick Carlisle has gotten many calls this offseason saying that you guys have given us hope. Like, you've put in hope back in basketball. And so I do kind of think that there's an element of that with this Kings team, that they just truly believe, much like OKC, like, you can win if you have 7 guys, 8 guys, 9 guys that are strong in a rotation. And I think in a weird way, they kind of feel like if they can defend at a decent level and just get 9 guys who are out there competing at all moments, like we've kind of talked about with the addition of Russell Westbrook, like, just setting a tone of every single night you're going to be some motherfuckers. Like, I kind of think that's the goal. And it's just, again, will it get tired 10 games in? If they're 3-7, I guess is maybe more realistic for if those questions are going to start to arise. Like, when they start to meet those hills and cliffs and things that Matt was talking about earlier, when they hit those moments, like, will they be able to respond?
Yeah, I think the guard depth that you mentioned definitely stands out with that 94 feet. Like, Neek today mentioned the importance of them having depth too, and pointed to, right, as you mentioned, the Pacers, but he also pointed to OKC. And Doug said something along the lines I can't remember if it was media day or first day of training camp, but I was told you couldn't pick up 94 feet, and then someone did it. So now we're going to do the same thing. I took that as him talking about Indiana. But I do think that, you mentioned, I guess, on the point of the depth, last time Chris and I went down and Doug said he wants to play 10 guys, right? Matt, I'm curious where you would get to 10, right, if we went down the list. And I feel like we can start with an easy 7 or 8 with starting lineup, right, of Dennis Schroder, Zach LaVine, Domantas Sabonis, Keegan Murray. That's 5. We got Malik Monk, Keon Ellis, and does Neek Clifford go in there? Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I think Neek is a rotation player day one.
And then where do we go from there? Drew Eubanks?
Well, again, if you believe in the jerseys, was it not Saric and Isaac Jones out there with the second team?
Yes, except we have to remember these were the last 5 minutes of the scrimmage, so we don't know how if he was with that group initially. But that 4 spot is definitely up for grabs. I mean, right, they finished with Plowden in that spot. I think Maxime Reynaud is going to be, maybe not right away in the conversation, but eventually that'll be his spot. I thought Isaac Jones would have more of an established opportunity there based off how he played in Summer League and that his full contract is converted. So maybe opening night it's IJ. But I mean, Saric has experience, Drew Eubanks has experience, and we weren't there for this, but I was speaking with Deuce and Mo, who were invited to watch the entire practice because of their TV responsibilities, and they said that Drew Eubanks hit a pair of threes earlier in the scrimmage. So, Eubanks has that experience. I don't know if I have full faith in Eubanks holding that position down all year long. I would hope Maxime would take it from him eventually, but I feel like if there's a guy that's 11, it's Devin Carter. He's just on the outs. And I don't know if Malik is going to handle those point guard responsibilities and Keon's going to be out there with him. Adding Devin Carter to that, you are now very undersized, although Keon and Devin on the floor together could certainly harass some ball handlers, but how many of those do you need on the floor at the same time? So, I mean,
Neither team is getting the ball across half of court.
I think I think 9 and 10 in the rotation is definitely up for grabs, and I guess we'll have to wait till Wednesday with the preseason game against Toronto to see what at least the first thought is of who those two guys are. But if I were to guess right now, I think I would guess probably Eubanks, and I guess I'll stick with IJ. I think he's going to get opportunity at that 4 just because of how well he played in Summer League and how physical he is.
Yeah, I could see it. I think you have a good point with Isaac for sure. He played really well last season, and he had a crazy good Summer League. No, I kind of thought it was more so at the 5 than the 4, even though they were pushing towards that. I thought his best minutes were at the 5, and I don't know. I kind of feel like he might just be a better option than Drew Eubanks at the 5. You're trying to run with pace, I mean, you don't have the same, about to say rim protection. I don't know how much Drew Eubanks is really giving you there in the first place, but definitely a size difference there. Is there what other positional battles, I guess, are you watching, Chris? Does it, you mentioned we saw Dario Saric today a little bit. Like, is there a little part of you that's like, hey, maybe a little bit of Dario in here at some point?
Yeah, I mean, the Dario Saric thing is definitely interesting just to figure out where, where he's going to play, and if he's going to play. Because, Brenden, you've been really consistent in saying that you've been hearing the Warriors and from the Nugget side that he was just unplayable. And, I think that's a little bit scary, especially considering, again, they traded Jonas Valanciunas, who's incredibly usable. Saric is definitely interesting, but I just have to stay locked in. Backup point guard is just fascinating. Like I think that it seems it's going to be Malik Monk right now, but Matt, you just kind of were joking about the Devin Carter 11 spot. Like I think that it's just a fascinating case of if Devin Carter is going to get minutes. I guess if it's going to be more practical, like something that we might actually see, it's just the depth at 2 that we've been talking about as well. Like, is Neat Clifford going to find minutes with Keon Ellis? And then is Malik Monk going to spend all of his time at the backup point guard, or is it going to be in the 2? Just kind of how they split all the minutes between Zach LaVine, Malik Monk, Keon Ellis, and Neat Clifford is really just I have no idea how it's going to happen.
Yeah, I feel like going back to the center battle too, we've heard a lot about how the Kings are going to use Domas differently from they did last year, and for really what I've taken away from that is they're going to use Domas mainly the same way they used him Beam Team 1 year, which is more out on the perimeter, more DHOs, kind of running through him. And that's great because of the incredible skill set that Domantas Sabonis has. But does that mean the 15 or so minutes a night that Domas is off the floor, you want to try and play the same way, or are you going to completely go away from that? Because if IJ is the guy at the backup center spot, well, IJ is more of an on-the-block center, which is, again, the exact opposite of what they're trying to do with Domas now, apparently. If you were to ask me which is the center on their roster that has the most potential to somewhat do what Domas does, it might be Maxime, but I don't know if Maxime Reno is ready for that right out the gate. Drew Eubanks, I look at more as a pick and pop or corner floor spacing center, but he's capable of doing that, has made a pretty, at least long career for himself in the league doing that. So I'm very curious about if it feels like if Domas is off the floor, Dennis Schroder has to be on it, or the Kings are going to really suffer playmaking wise, unless they feel that Malik and or Reynaud can hold that responsibility down for a 3 to 5 minute stretch.
Which
It's so
might
weird to
also
me
be the
how-
answer to the.
Go ahead, Brenden. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say that might also be the answer to the backup point guard thing. Like, it might just be Domas, essentially.
Right. Yeah, exactly. All I was going to say is it's so weird to me that this just continues to be a very consistent problem. I don't know who I want to, I guess, put the blame on, for lack of a better term, but it's been a consistent problem for Domantas Sabonis since he joined the Kings is what do you do with his backup spot? I mean, from the start, like with Rashawn Holmes. Rashawn Holmes was a great starter for this team, incredibly productive, incredibly efficient. Like that's what he was known for. Domantas Sabonis comes in. Rashawn Holmes just can't find a role because it's such a limited, Sabonis is going to be out there for 35 minutes. You really are only going to get, well, there's 12 there. And then maybe if you are a special type of big that we've been trying to find, you can maybe sprinkle some minutes playing next to him, but that just hasn't been somebody we've been able to find. But do you find somebody who is similar to him? Like I remember at one point, Plumlee was somebody who had a ton of dribble handoffs, had a ton of screen assists as well. It seemed like a natural fit to be a backup. Is that the answer, or do you go with more of a stretch big? Do you go with somebody who fills in the gaps that Sabonis has, more of a rim protector, because Sabonis isn't a rim protector, and so you kind of need one? That's more of the route they went when they went with JaVale McGee. It just is very strange to me, and I don't know who to place the blame on, and if it is a Domantas Sabonis problem, or if it's a Kings just struggling to find the right prototype. But it is definitely notable that Domantas Sabonis' backup has just been a really, really big hole and a impossible problem for this team to solve. Like even Jonas Valanciunas played very well, but it was not like a seamless, perfect fit with the two of them.
And it might just have to do with like building an offense around a super unique player. It's hard to replace that, obviously. And you might just go like more traditional pick and roll compared to dribble handoff and keep the same general idea. But I will add, I think that the quick passing and the, Mike Brown will call it like 0.5-second decision making, right? And I don't think we've heard that wording in any sort of way. But curious what you thought, Matt. I thought the ball was moving really well during the scrimmages today. They were creating good looks. They weren't going in. It was kind of ugly, to be honest. But this is also day 3 of training camp. Guys getting their legs. I think it's somewhat to be expected. But what did you think of, the brief glimpse that we got, which actually, shout out to Doug, was, I would say, a decent amount today. What did you think of the ball movement that was going on?
Yeah, I mean, going to the shot making thing, I do think guys were gassed. They looked gassed. There was a moment where Dennis Schroder got a rebound and walked the ball up the floor, and it's just like, this is end of the day, and you've got no legs, and you've been going potentially 2-a-days every day. The only day we know for sure they had a 2-a-day was day 1. Don't know if they had one today. Don't know if they had one yesterday. But we know conditioning and running has been a big emphasis on training camp to this point. So yeah, guys look tired. Shots were like Zach LaVine shot a 3 that barely made it to the front of the rim. That's very unlike him. So I think this is just tired legs. I'm not overly concerned about that. Yeah, I thought the ball movement was good. I thought there were a couple of moments. There was some, like Domas had a beautiful drop off bounce pass to a cutting Dennis Schroder for a layup. DeMar DeRozan also hit Schroeder on a cut for a layup. I thought the ball movement was really good. I also thought that one of the things that Doug has said that stuck with me is he wants this team to be brave, not perfectionists. Like he wants them to try things, and I thought they tried some things. I thought Plowden tried some things. I thought even Devin Carter tried to like shoot a pull-up corner 3 leaner and realized, oh God, I'm not getting the shot off, and managed to get the pass off and not turn the ball over. So like I'm okay with them trying some stuff. Now is the time to be sloppy. I'm expecting the game on Wednesday against the Raptors to be sloppy, especially if pace is what this team is all about. I asked Malik Monk, like, what is going to surprise other teams about the way you guys play the most? And he says how fast we are. So if you're playing with that kind of pace, it's going to be sloppy. They're going to be dribbling off the foot or miscommunication. But if the ball is zipping around, you can live with that versus guys just standing around ball watching, which we didn't get any indication of. So I'm again, I feel like on the court we were seeing correlation to what Doug has been saying. Doesn't mean the execution is perfect, but one matches the other. And that wasn't always the case over the last couple of years of they would say one thing and it wouldn't look like that on the floor. Plus you had Mike Brown saying we need to be defense, defense, defense. You had Monty McNair saying we need to be offense, offense, offense. And that was just a whole disaster in its own right.
Yeah, weren't really pushing in the same direction. And seems to be the case right now. Again, practice games is what we're seeing right now. It may be different when, I think 2 weeks into the season, this could feel way different, to be honest. Like they have a very hard schedule. And unfortunately, we know with the history of the Kings, you guys better than I, this can go downhill very fast. So we'll see if they're able to keep things together. But I do want to point out some quotes from Domas that I think could be taken interestingly, talking about the difference between this year's camp compared to last. And one of them is quote, "This year it's been very strict, very strict. Scott and Doug have implemented their rules and their values. And it reminds me back when I was a rookie." He also was asked about Domas or about the team being an extension of the head coach, like we were talking about earlier. And he said, there's a discipline, accountability, and that's something that this place needs. And I'm excited. Another one, Jason Anderson pushed him a little bit later to clarify on what exactly he meant by that. And he said just everything, very, very, very professional. And I don't know how to explain that without saying other things from the past, but I don't want to get into that. And he was also, for what it's worth, tone wise, like a little laughing at it, like, hey, I'm not going to do that. He wasn't super serious or anything like that. Don't mind my read necessarily tone. But how much do you read into that? Is it hard not to? Like, he's clearly saying a little bit of something that it's different, but also Mike was very much pushing discipline and accountability, at least to us publicly.
Yeah, I mean, I take that way more as a front office jab than anything else, in my opinion. I mean, I know as we've established the lines before, it's not necessarily like Domas was Team Mike Brown, but I the fact that he threw Scott into that initially to me too is fairly telling just how involved Scott is, which we I think had an idea of for sure, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, that rings more of the communication side of things, which we've praised Scott for. Even talking to Malik Monk openly about his trade situation and everything like that. That's where I'm reading it. I don't know. I mean, you could definitely I could understand where maybe there is some Mike Brown jabs in there, but when I think of professionalism more so, like you said, I mean, I think Mike Brown was very professional in how he handled things. As we know, there was just a lot of miscommunication in the front office.
Yeah, I think it's easy to make stuff like this, like make a mountain out of a molehill with stuff like this. I know a lot of people try to make a big deal out of the no strings attached comment from Keegan Murray, as if he was saying, like, I'm not being put into a box anymore, but you're also in year 4 and you're being challenged to be more aggressive, which means hopefully you're getting a little more freedom to try some things. I don't read into it too much. It's been pretty well publicized that there were disconnects between Mike Brown and Domantas Sabonis. There was very clear factions, if you want to call it that, in the locker room of who was on whose side and who was on Team Doug Christie versus who was on Team Mike Brown. And most of the people that were on Team Mike Brown are no longer here for a reason, right? But at the same time, like, I thought it was refreshing to hear DeMar DeRozan talk about it as openly as he did during media day. I think it's fine to have players address it and how different it is right now over the first 3 days. When we get to Wednesday's game, I want to stop hearing about it, because there's also some accountability that needs to be taken on from everybody for how last season went. And the last basketball that we saw Domantas Sabonis watch, he laid an absolute egg on a playoff type-ish play-in stage on national television against the Dallas Mavericks. So he has to also acknowledge areas of his game that he has come up short with. And again, like, it could just be the different delivery of messages. But if Doug is trying to preach accountability for especially things on the defensive end, and guys on this roster are not known for that, if Doug tries to hold them accountable for that, how does Doug do that in a way that doesn't get old the same way Mike Brown's got old? So that's going to be on Doug and his difference as a coach, but it's also going to be on the guys, especially the veterans, Domas, Malik, all of them, to be allowed to be held accountable. And I think it's easy to be held accountable in the first 3 days when everybody's excited. But when we're, like you said, Brenden, 2 weeks into a season, Like, who knows? And that's where we're going to learn a lot about this team. But right now, it's encouraging.
For sure. And as you guys said, yeah, I wasn't trying to necessarily make it a Mike Brown thing, more so presenting the question that way, because I think it very much could get taken in that way. And, well, not to say that I don't think there could be a little bit of that, but more than anything, I think it was just Domas commenting on the current state. And, the questions pushed him in that direction a little bit as well, understandably so. But I don't know if 32-year-old point guard on his 10th team that's never made an all-star or an all-NBA team is about to change this entire franchise. It was slightly disrespectful because I do think Dennis Schroder is a good player. And I just feel like he actually may be a Hall of Famer because it is the basketball Hall of Fame, not the NBA Hall of Fame, Naismith Hall of Fame, whatever it may be. Started half the games in his career. I feel like he's getting talked about like he is about to change absolutely everything. And I get it. You didn't have a point guard for the second half of last season, but they're also talking like they've been like starved of a point guard forever. I'm like, you kind of had one at the beginning of last season too. And it's just a little bit weird to me. I get why he's going to help and that this is the big addition. Clearly Doug had identified him and relayed that to Scott, and Scott seemed to be on the same page there. Doug on Tuesday said Dennis looks like he's been here his whole life. It's not hard when you're that good. I mean, the kid understands how to play. He's a winner. He plays the right way. He moves the basketball. He plays defense, not afraid to talk to his teammates. Everything that I was looking at him to be is what I'm seeing out there on the floor. So I'm really, really pleased. Am I being too much here in like feeling like, why are we talking about Dennis in this way?
I mean, it's kind of natural. Like you would expect the new addition, and like you said, I mean, they went from having literally no point guard to having, like you said, a guy who's started half the games in his career. He's a fringe starter, but still a solid point guard and everything like that. Like I think that's more. Kind of just why I would expect them to have these kind of comments, but you're right. Like they are making this guy out to sound like he is ready to have an all-star season, and it's fine. He's going to be a really solid addition to this team. I continually have said I think he's going to be better than what I think people expect. I think people kind of just expect him to be a 10, 12 point a game point guard. I think he'll be a little bit better than that, but he's not going to be an all-star. And he's been on 10 teams. He's had impact on several different teams, but he also has just not really been impactful on most of his stops in the NBA. And I think that we should now now I'm starting to go more towards where everybody else is, where it's just being hyped up way too much internally. And it makes me a little bit nervous that maybe they're leaning too much into Dennis, taking them to a different level than we saw at the end of last year.
I think we're all riding really high on Eurobasket and him being the Eurobasket MVP and bringing the Eurobasket title back, and rightfully so. And in the sense that it's a very impressive international accomplishment for someone who has an extremely impressive resume. I mean, I talked to a German basketball writer and someone who covers the German national team who says Dennis Schroder is the second best German basketball player in history, second just to Dirk Nowitzki. So that's pretty high standard to be in internationally. But you're right, the NBA resume also speaks for itself. Now, I will say Dennis was an important part of that very young Detroit Pistons team that lost in the first round of the playoffs. Yeah. I don't think anybody was expecting Detroit to even get there, let alone advance out of the first round, and Dennis helped them get there. And all signs point to, and the people that I talked to in Detroit said that the Pistons would have loved to have had him back. It just financially wasn't in the cards to be able to bring him back. But I also had a conversation with a buddy of mine from Chicago who hosts the Chicago Bulls podcast, who basically said, like, Dennis Schroder is the key to making this work in Sacramento, because the only time Levine and DeRozan worked in Chicago was when Lonzo Ball was healthy. So it just seems like the way that the Kings are talking about Dennis Schroder, it sounds like a group that is excited about their point guard. But I also do think they're showing their hand a little bit on how much they are relying on their lone point guard to make all of this work. And knock on wood, God forbid any kind of injury happens or Dennis Schroder just struggles or does not live up to it. Like, as good as DeMar DeRozan is as a closer, as good as Zach LaVine is as a scorer, as aggressive as we want Keegan Murray to be, and as good as Domantas Sabonis is as a creator, if you're putting all your eggs in this basket of Dennis Schroder and it doesn't necessarily work out, what is your plan B? Hopefully we don't even have to see the answer to that question. But yeah, I do think the Kings are putting a lot on the shoulders of Schroder. If you're Schroder, this is what you want. Your real NBA chance. And Schroder even said he's been looking for his NBA home since he turned down that big contract offer with the Lakers that people still hold over him. This is his opportunity to prove that he's the guy as a veteran on a pretty veteran-laden team, at least in the starting lineup. So this is your shot. Go for it. And it's not like the Kings are expecting Dennis Schroder, or anybody's expecting Dennis Schroder to lead the Kings deep into the playoffs, but if he can be the glue and make it work, then it sure looks good for him.
Yeah, I
I
think
also want to just like quickly say like the problem as well is like they're offensively, you mentioned the Lonzo Ball thing. Dennis Schroeder is not the same. Dennis Schroeder is not a pass first point guard. There's
Correct.
questions about how he's going to fit into this Kings offense because he's also not really a knockdown shooter either. And so if he is going to play off ball, him being out there with DeMar DeRozan and Domantas Sabonis, like that just really leaves Zach LaVine and Keegan Murray as your true shooters. Is that a good enough offensive lineup? We're also really hyping up, we being the Kings, royal we, hyping up Dennis Schroeder's defense. It's not as if he's an all NBA defensive player or anything like that. Like it's fine if that is a strong suit of his game, but it's not as if he, who has been on 10 different teams, who has been in the league for years, it's not even as if he's been at the elite level in terms of defense. And so it's great that he brings a very needed skill set to this team. And again, I feel like I'm higher than most, but on Dennis Schroeder, but at the same time, it's just a guy who has tons of years of NBA experience to tell you exactly what he is.
Yeah, I think the glue is the right way to say it. And yeah, to your credit, Chris, you have been one of the guys pretty early on in the signing being like, hey, Dennis is better than people think, this is not to say that he's a bad player. I'm just, saying all relative to the expectations that we are putting on him. Again, I guess I'm using the royal we here. 8 teams in 3 years. And you could take
That's
that
insane.
multiple ways, right? There's teams that wanted him, like he was traded for during these times. There's also teams that were willing to move on from him. And it goes a little bit of both ways there. I just,
as recently as the Warriors last year, like he had a great season for the Nets where he was averaging 18 a game. He had a great end of season where he was playing great for the Pistons, but that middle chunk or was that the beginning of, no, that was the middle chunk of the season where he goes to the Warriors. They needed a backup point guard, and I'm sure he put up some decent numbers, but they did not want him in Golden State where they were trying to compete.
And for proper context too, the Nets got rid of Dennis Schroeder because he was playing too well and they were trying to lose games.
Right.
So like it's not like he was run out of New York or anything, but it clearly didn't work in Golden State. And I feel like his numbers in Golden State, when you look at the rest of the season in the last couple of years, were such an anomaly that I don't want to throw it out because context is important. But it was very clear right away to everybody that Schroeder was not a good fit in the Warriors system. But we also know the Sacramento Kings have liked to play copycat with a lot of things the Warriors have done over the years. So I don't think it's not an A comparison or anything like that. There are some distinct differences between how the Warriors play and how the Kings play. But I mean, you have to take every bit of context that we have with Dennis Schroeder with a grain of salt. And as much as he's built a very successful career for himself, and you look at his career numbers, and they're certainly not anything to bat an eye at. If you're plugging those numbers into the guy that makes everything work category, which is what he is here in Sacramento, or he seems to be here in Sacramento, I think there's more than enough reason to be a little nervous about that.
Yeah, and year prior, like before that Brooklyn Golden State Detroit year last year, he played on Toronto and Brooklyn and had solid year for both of them. Prior to that, you remember he started the year on Boston. That one didn't go quite so great. Ends up on Houston temporarily, but then the Lakers liked him enough. Obviously, they offered that 80 million, but they traded for him again, which is a credit to, obviously they like what he brings on the floor. So it's less of, thinking that Dennis isn't good. It's just more of, this is a franchise point guard isn't on 8 teams in 3 years. And I just feel like sometimes I'm like, we're talking about this like it's a franchise point guard, which is, I guess my main point really in all of this here. I was planning on getting to Keegan, but we're running short on time. We're also supposed to talk to Keegan tomorrow. Fingers crossed. Maybe we're supposed to talk to him today. We'll see what actually ends up happening there. The other thing that we haven't touched on, though, is Jonathan Kuminga. We just briefly did sign a deal with the Golden State Warriors, 2 years, $48.5 million. The numbers are presented really funny because I'm pretty sure that also includes his trade kicker, because everybody's just assuming he's going to get traded. And if you couldn't tell, the agent is doing a lot of communication through Shams here, by Shams being like, oh no, they're going to rip up the contract. It's a second-year team option. Like, that's not going to get picked up. The team can do whatever they want at that point, or whatever team were to trade for Jonathan Kuminga as he becomes trade eligible again after signing that deal on, he becomes trade eligible again on January 15th in the middle of this season. How much we're talking about there being good vibes right now. Everybody's like, hey, we know what we're going into this year with. Does January roll around and it's like this cloud is just hanging over this team again? Or do you feel good about that was already going on over this offseason and they seem to feel pretty good right now?
I should say also, I think I saw today that Anthony Slater says that Jonathan Kuminga doesn't want to be traded in the middle of the season. So take that for what it's worth.
Interesting.
I don't want to ever make less than $1 million in a year. So we cannot want what we don't want to happen. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. But yeah, no, I mean, to the root of your question, it does feel like it will at least be a question regardless of how the season goes. I mean, Jonathan Kuminga is always kind of the allure for Jonathan Kuminga to the Kings has always been a long-term one. And I think that still exists. I think I don't know how his contract would necessarily play into the different kind of deal that the Kings would have to offer. But, to me, I still think that they're definitely at least going to have, or at least be in the conversation for it come January. To me, that seems like the perfect time in the season where we're definitely going to know which direction this thing is going. And I think we all kind of know that at that point, long term would probably be the best way of viewing the roster.
So a little mute button on your computer, Matt.
Whoops. If there's anything that was clear about this saga of Kuminga versus the Warriors, which, I mean, we got to be like straightforward about what it was. The Warriors won again. I mean, the Warriors won this negotiation. They won this stalemate, and good for them. There was a time where I didn't think they would. But if there's anything that's been made clear through this entire situation, it's that the Warriors are structuring this Kuminga contract so they can use him to go big fish hunting, because they are very much trying to maximize the final years of Steph Curry and a championship window with the Warriors, and I don't blame them for it. So if we keep that in mind, why in the world would the Sacramento Kings be that trade partner? I felt as soon as this deal got done that any chance of the Kings having Kuminga in the immediate future was gone, not because the Kings wouldn't want him anymore. I think the Kings, like you said, Chris, will absolutely be like picking up the phone in January and going, hey, we're still here. But maybe like if Jimmy Butler weren't on the Golden State Warriors, maybe I'd say DeMar DeRozan entices them, but I don't think DeMar is going to be enticing to them around the time of the year that they're looking to add a big fish. I don't think they want anything to do with Levine's contract or Domantas Sabonis' contract. So again, is it Malik Monk again? Well, they don't clearly don't seem to be too interested in him either. So I just feel like the the Kuminga conversation in Sacramento, at least for the short term, is over. And it seemed like Scott Perry and the Kings felt that for a while, hence of how they just turned their attention to the training camp with the roster that they have. But I guess never say never, and a lot can change in a few months, and who knows? Who knows what the Warriors are doing?
Well, I think it kind of depends on how much he plays in Golden State too. Like, I think
True.
that was always the problem with him coming back is that, okay, you're bringing this guy in. He's going to be on a $22 million, I think it's something like that, $22 million per year contract or something around that. Is he gonna, like, as a trade chip? Yeah, okay, it's fine that you want that salary coming back, but is the team that you're trying to find a deal for, are they going to be willing to pay somebody that caliber, or are they going to be willing to pay Jonathan Kuminga that money? Because if he's just not playing for Golden State, if he's averaging 9 points a game or whatever, I just don't know what his value is going to be on the open market, or if it'll kind of be the same that we're seeing now, that people are just hesitant to pull the trigger on him.
Yeah, going to be a weird one. I'm sure that we are going to continue talking about this throughout the course of the season. For what it's worth, Sam Amick was on. Unfortunately, we're going to have to. And I am going to continue to keep fighting, making jokes that include the first three letters of Kuminga's last name. I want to also note, Sam Amick came on Sacktown Sports 1140 this morning, shout out, and mentioned that the Kings realized that they did not want Malik Monk, they being the Warriors, and he mentioned the idea of like, hey, they might have even tried to sort of pivot last minute, even mentioned that like he heard things about the possibility of Kuminga considering holding out this year with the idea that the Kings are going to push to get a deal done, and eventually he'll go over there. And obviously, none of that ends up happening. He re-signs with the Golden State Warriors. Shams pretends like it's $8 more million than the contract that was on the table however long ago, even though it's pretty much the exact same thing. And we are back here with the Sacramento Kings headed into training camp with Dennis Schroder being the main addition, Scott Perry and Doug Christie running the show. And we're going to see how this all plays out. We got, 6 days? Back to Westbrook rumors too. Mentioned in that same Amick conversation. So all full circle. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Well, basketball Kings conversation is over, and we are headed to overtime. Chris, hit the sound effect. There you go. Beautiful thing. Beautiful thing. Matt, if you'd like to contribute a sound effect, always feel free throughout any point in the show. No big deal, though.
I have no idea what's going on.
This is where we talk about whatever we want, and it's meant that we've talked about 2K the last 2 episodes, and I hate to do it a third time, but I'm definitely going to do it again because this is literally the 2K trio, and I'm going to ask you guys a thing that I probably maybe should have asked before this. We have a small crew going on right now, right, in 2K, and I'm proposing, if you guys agree, and this is, if you don't play 2K, don't worry about this part of the conversation, to be honest, because we're a little in the weeds here. I just am suggesting that we could open up our crew to Kings fans. We got to get that rep level up, guys. I'm trying to get these cap breakers. What do you think about the idea?
I really don't care.
I mean, I'm all for it. 2K is a sensitive subject for me right now.
Why is that, Matt?
I am crashing out over my controller having stick drift, and I do not want to give Sony $75 to get a new controller right now. But oh man, the stick drift is making me crash out. Chris Watkins getting a big and my son too. It's my son plus stick drift equals crash out Matt when we're playing 2K. So might take a little break, but we'll see.
It's a great time. But I just think, we could use help getting those cap breakers, and then I'll just kick the people once we get to level 40. It's no big deal. Not really. So I'm just saying, we can help each other out here. Just an idea.
I have no problem with it. There's no other way that we're going to reach the top levels, if not, because we're struggling.
We are struggling. It's not getting done right now, but we may get there eventually. We'll see. So trying to join, drop it in the comments. Let me know. We will see. But Matt, thank you for joining us, bro. Late episode here, fresh off a Niners win, feeling great. Thank you for hopping on, man. And everybody be sure to obviously check out all the great work you do on the Locked On podcast. You work your ass off, gotta say. I know we talk about that a little bit, but publicly give you some flowers.
I appreciate that, guys. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm glad King's Pulse is back, and I guess we'll see if where this roller coaster or this circus takes us. So, I mean, I'm just excited to have Kings basketball in literally less than a week. Like, we'll be in the Golden One Center in less than a week watching Kings to some capacity. So, here we go. Let the run or race or roller coaster or whatever begin.
All of it. All of it. I can't wait to joke about a player on the Kings having stick drift in real life, too. It's going to be a great thing.
Better than skates.
Hey, that's true. That's a great one. Chris, anything before we get out of here?
No. I have to go pick my girlfriend up from Aftershock, so.
There you go. There you go. Well, appreciate everybody tuning in to this episode of the Kings Pulse podcast. Be sure to check out all the great work that Matt George does. And if you enjoyed, subscribe on YouTube. We're available on all audio listening platforms. A little subscription there too as well to keep your finger on the pulse of the Sacramento Kings moving forward. Appreciate everybody for listening. You'll hear from us again on Monday.